coming at you live from their secret location in an underwater bunker 2 miles off the Emerald Coast. It's Chimichanga Talk with your host, Deadpool Speaks. All right. And we're back. We're back for another round of podcasting. It is me, your host, Deadpool Speaks. And the FBI has finally unredacted me. So little by little, they're starting to figure out that they let me off the UFO, but not without casualties. So I'd like to go ahead and present to you, with me as always, and for the first time, we got Bad Juju. Hey, Bad Juju.
Hi. I'm surprised you let me on. I mean, it's
I'm surprised. Yeah. Okay.
What the hell? You interrupted?
So yeah, always. So here's the thing. This show is sometimes about me, sometimes about other people. But you know, we like to go ahead and have fun here because today our show is sponsored by the CIA. The CIA bringing all sorts of wonderful. We just got news that they pulled their sponsorship and no longer are available. So we're just gonna go ahead and do other things that are absolutely fun, like going to MIA. Which is Miami, for all those people who didn't actually know. Did you know about Miami?
No. What happened?
What happened in Miami? They sell really, really good cafecitos, which you're a coffee person, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm a coffee person, yeah.
All right, fantastic. Well,
yeah.
Nobody cares. So here's what we're going to do. I have a guest on today, and the thing is most people, have an online presence. Right, but this man goes beyond that by having too much of an online presence and not enough combing of the hair. If you've ever kind of followed him, and there's several places that you can find him throughout social media, our next guest is absolutely amazing, has a comment for everything from wrestling to movies, always out to share a big smile and a big hairdo. I'd like to go ahead, online commentator, right? Creator of the... Hold on a second, there we go. It's a big truck passing through. So, online commentator, creator of the Lucid Memory YouTube channel, and director of The Plunge. And that's actually premiering here in February 15th at Pensacon in Pensacola, Florida. Big round of applause for the absolutely amazing and absolutely wonderful Jeremy Branch.
I'm going to be honest, when you started talking about Bad Juju and some of the recent horror that's been going on, I wasn't sure if we were going to start talking about geopolitics or if we were going to start talking about Blake Lively versus Justin Baldoni.
Let's not get into that. I'm a Blakester all the way, I think. I don't know what side I'm on.
Fortunately, we're just going to be talking about horror movies. Oh, boy. And I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me as kind of What was the term that you used? Human guinea pig?
That is our technical term, but it's been a while because, Chimichanga Talk took a break, right? Because, like I said, we were abducted by UFO aliens and
unfortunate development.
Yeah, but we learned a lot of wonderful things from our neighbors. But now we've been flying drones everywhere and being inconspicuously showing up, especially places like southern Alabama and deep in the Arkansas mountains. I got Juju here. Bad Juju here is wanting to come on.
Well, when I saw it was in the sky, you gotta understand that I was very curious, and I ended up coming with you guys, so now I'm here.
Okay, so talk a little louder because our alien friends can't hear you. But either way, yeah, we are going to be discussing horror because one of the most amazing things that happened while I was on vacation, right, is there has been a resurgence of indie horror films that have been coming out. You more than ever, directing this film and kind of, it's a documentary, right?
It is. So it's called The Plunge. It is about pinball. More specifically, there is a local pinball league here in Pensacola called City of Five Flags Pinball. There's this guy named Jamie, and Jamie owns 25 different machines. We all go over to his house once a month, and we play tournaments. And I just thought this was such fascinating material to kind of mine from and explore, something that I think all of us can kind of relate with. And that's just the way that fandom, hobby groups, all of that stuff create community. And I think horror movies are another really good example of that.
That was a brilliant segue.
Thank you.
Brought to you by Pepsi Zero. And no, but actually that's true. And the thing is like, you know, what can people expect like from the premiere of The Plunge? Because the thing is that we're going to plunge from, you know, pinball games into horror, but I really like the fact that you took this initiative to be like, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and take a really good look into the lives of these people, because I mean that's what documentaries explore. They kind of teach us to look behind the veil of what we assume and get, you know, through our minds. But what do you say to that?
So I grew up like many of us playing retro video games. I think pinball was slightly before my generation. Like I have an older brother who's about 8 years older than me, and he played pinball growing up, but I guess it didn't captivate me quite in the same way as your Mortal Kombat, your Killer Instinct, your Street Fighter, all of the like kind of current gen games that were out when I was a teenager. So to fast forward many, many years later and find out there's like a thriving community of people that are still playing pinball, and that the game is revolutionized like along the way. It's not just the old EM games, the most basic games. Now there's like digital display screens, games within games, and it's a group of people that really, I would say, cap it around 60, and then some of the younger league members are 10, 8 years old, you know, kids of some of the players that come along as well. And I just thought it was really cool to find out that there's like a thriving community in pretty much anything that you can think of. And pinball was just like one, you know, this documentary is kind of like a peek behind one of infinite different curtains of things that, like, if you're really into something, your people are out there and they're just waiting to connect over this thing that like they're super enthusiastic about too. And I think that's really like, it's inspiring when you step back and look at it in terms of just like any sort of fandom, you know?
No, absolutely. And I mean, I think that's what like kind of brought us to this topic, is because when you have, and I mean, there's always been a horror community out there, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, you go back to the age of like trauma movies and Roger Corman and just like a lot of this stuff that just a lot of people grew up with. And now I think the reach of technology has come to a point where we all carry like a video camera in our pockets, you know, and the accessibility is no longer, you have to take a 4-year course to go ahead and learn how to edit a video. There are so many programs out there that are like, hey, you know, we can piece this together for you.
Do it for you, yeah, right.
You know, so I think that's kind of bring us to a very interesting point in our lives where we're seeing like this amazing kind of renaissance of how, you know, indie films in general, you know, kind of have come to light. So you have a lot of really kind of growing up pieces, which I've seen some great pieces this last year, 2024. But then at the same time, it's like the horror movies. It's like, wait a minute, we're going back to practical effects. We're going back to just kind of nitty-gritty, kind of dirty filmmaking, you know. And over time, and this is kind of like the whole beef of it, is that Hollywood really didn't kind of see a lot of that. You know, I mean, they saw the special effects, of course, in the big budget movies, things like, you know, by Spielberg and just amazing industrial light and magic, which I get. But now it's like there's that small window that's starting to open up where anybody could possibly win an award for just being creative about the way they do their things.
I heard somebody smarter than me coin it as the democratization of filmmaking, and I think that's such a brilliant way of putting it, you know?
Oh, no, absolutely. Not to politicize anything, but yeah, no, I agree with that 110%. And things are weird. We need escapes, you know? We need things like pinball and like, you know, really good movies that, you know, don't threaten to deport us. So, well, I know.
You can take democratization that way.
Well, you know, I mean, deport us to a good place, like a happy place of horror.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about that for a second, because the thing is that you know, you have this YouTube channel, and you started from humble roots. We were talking about that before we actually started recording. You had Be Terrible movies, right? Because you had this really interesting fascination with film, and I mean, you still do. It's not like you had it and you lost it or someone took it from you. But what's your viewpoint on that? Like, how you see all these amazing indie movies that are popping up now throughout the years?
Yeah, horror I think is the perfect avenue to like kind of explore this theme, right? Because in a way, it's the most accessible, maybe other than documentaries. Documentaries you can do with a skeleton crew, and I think that was one of the things that kind of compelled me to do it that way, is because I could do it by myself and I didn't have to deal with freaking actors.
Yeah, I'm looking at you, Bad Juju.
Yeah. However, horror movies are cool because you can do them on a low budget and you can like exercise your technical skills. And I guess what I mean by that is filmmaking, storytelling is all about empathy. And if you can connect with an audience, create compelling characters, and then watch them die and evoke some sort of emotion in that way, I think that you can prove that you can do suspense, you can do terror, you can do different sort of emotions within a framework that's like, it's tried and true. Because horror fans, they're a very unique lot. And when I first did start doing YouTube content, maybe I saw there was a commercial viability in covering Marvel movies, superhero stuff, and I do still love that. It's definitely something that I hold dear, as it kind of changed the trajectory of my life, those MCU movies. So like I have a lot of reverence for those, but as the years have gone along, I've kind of got back in touch with these root parts of myself and my own personal journey as somebody who loved movies. And you mentioned trauma earlier in the introduction. I feel like Full Moon Features was such a big part of my childhood, right?
Yeah.
You would go into the video store, especially people of a certain age, and see these VHS covers, these outlandish covers with puppets and monsters and all sorts of different things. And as a 8 to 10-year-old, this was like the most compelling stuff. I had to bring it home and watch all of them. And Charles Band did a very specific thing. Roger Corman did a very specific thing. Kaufman did a very specific thing at Troma. But in the past couple of years, we've seen this new crop of filmmakers come up that are able to, they really defy the odds of like the limitations of the genre in this like less is more approach to things. And we're going to talk about Damien Leone. I think he's kind of an outlier in this thing, but when you look at like what A24 and Neon have been able to do over the last couple of years, it's really incredible.
Yeah. Well, and that's funny that you mentioned that, because Lloyd Kaufman, he was on our show previously, and he did go ahead and kind of mention on our show that they used their studios back in the day to edit Rocky, and
really,
yeah, that was a really cool like little segment, and it was interesting to see that it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to go ahead and ruin my directing kind of like repertoire, my street cred, by doing all these big budget stuff, when his whole thing was like, I love this tchotchke stuff. He wouldn't kind of sell out in a sense. But then again, I mean, Lloyd Kaufman's all about merchandising and everything else. His book, Make Your Own Damn Movie, was like a staple of like guerrilla filmmakers, along with like, oh my God, what's this guy's name? Robert Rodriguez. There you go.
Yeah,
Robert Rodriguez, who is like a lot of these indie directors. They came, Eli Roth now. They all started, and even the South Park guys. They all started around Troma, which they took Caro syrup and red dye food coloring and turned it into an art.
yeah, absolutely.
And we're actually going to be seeing pretty soon now the release of the remake of The Toxic Avenger, which I am just like so curious. I mean, it was a great film to sit back and just really, like, it's the kind of film that you call like a stoner film. It's like it's the type of film you watch when you just don't need to really get that much involved. It's that one friend that you have that you bring along because he's a good time, but you never ask him to like be the best man at your wedding. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
But it's interesting to see how kind of like all this has taken shape and form in the last couple years, especially like with the growth of iPhone filmmaking. When you look at the Florida Project and like these other films that were either like shot on an iPhone or just kind of like everyone's editing through like their mobile devices, it's insane.
Yeah, yeah, and then Steven Soderbergh, somebody who does have a long history in Hollywood, goes in and makes I can't recall the name of the movie right now, but he shot a whole film on iPhone, and I don't have my my gear handy right now, but half of the documentary was shot with my iPhone, and then I used a Sony A7 III and a little shotgun mic and some, really, really accessible resources. I probably $5,000 worth of equipment, and it wasn't bought for the particular reason of making this movie. It was just bought to shoot photos of birds out in the backyard or whatever. And then I'm like, well, I have all of this stuff. Why not utilize it? And I do think that you touched on so many of those like really influential filmmakers. I think Kevin Smith is another one from growing up, that it's like once you started to see that crop of independent filmmakers in the 1990s coming up and having massive commercial success, all of a sudden it's like, wait a second, like we can all make movies now. And then to the point where like we do all have 4K cameras on our phone. Yeah. Like the sky's the limit. I think that the access to it has really changed the way that people are approaching it. And that's for better or worse, right? Like I host a film festival at Pensacon, and we get 100, give or take, submissions every year. And some of them are like cream of the crop. They look like they should be Pixar movies. Animation software has come so far in the past 20 years. And then we get stuff that should have never been submitted to film festivals and everything in between. So there's a lot more junk to weed through probably now, but it's inexpensive junk. The thing is, to make a crappy movie even back in the day was a huge investment of time and money. Correct. And now every failure gets you that much closer to success. So even the bad movies that come through as submissions, I'm like, got to give it up to them. They tried it. They did a thing. They set out and they accomplished what they set out to do. And maybe it didn't land exactly like it could, but the next one will probably be better.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I mean, but then again, every once in a while you have a wonderful U-Bowl in there. That's
good call.
Where you kind of, hey, the source material does itself, but no. I'm going to set it for a second. Oh, there we go.
But I do, agree, the fact that Kevin Smith was able to film Clerks was I'm pretty sure his first, or at least one of his first kind of out there movies. He had to film it at night, and that's why it was all in black and white. That's impressive. That he worked with what he had and made a movie that is now like I wouldn't say a family name.
It's a family film you watch at Christmas.
Yeah, but it's definitely come to a lot of households, and it's definitely made a name. Well,
it's like the thing is you don't have to sell your comic book collection to make a movie nowadays. Yeah. And I think 90% of a lot of films is just, like you said, getting it done, getting out there, shooting it, and then doing the arduous task of editing, figuring out what works and what doesn't, how to tell a story.
I collected comic books in the 1990s, so if I were to sell my whole collection, I'd probably get like $10 back.
You're part of that Image comic stuff, huh?
Yeah, that was me.
It's like, look at this gold foil. This thing's gonna go for hundreds.
It's an investment.
Yeah,
it's an investment, KS.
Yeah, I gotta introduce you to a couple friends who own Beanie Babies, and
yeah, sure.
That way you guys could trade up some. But yeah, no, like I see that, like we were talking about horror movies as a whole, kind of just, and I have a lot of friends that are directors of said horror movies that they produce these wonderful films that most people are like, why am I watching this? But then again, they're really passionate about it. I mean, this is kind of like, their opus, right? And it questions the kind of like art is speculative, right? And it's in the eye of the beholder. Because there's some people that will see a trauma movie and be like, yo, this is not for me. But then there's the group that's like, I feel right at home here with a fat man being eaten by an elevator getting charged into pieces. Or a gigantic talking pus-filled penis. It's so crazy how you can go through one stage of something and their lineup is just insane. But then you have like really classy, artsy movies when they're like done, you're like, what did I just watch? I mean, it kind of chilled me to the core, and it was really disturbing, but it's not what I'm typically used to. And I think we have both ends of that spectrum when it comes to horror. And more people are coming up with like innovative ways to share this. Like, I'm pretty sure you've seen these top 10 lists with like, the greatest horror movies on YouTube. And they're these little short films that play to the idea. And, like Bad Juju's like, hey, I want to write something. And he has like these wonderful ideas. And I'm like, the key to kind of selling it to your audience is keeping them there, holding them down, and then little by little letting them explore what makes it uncomfortable within them. Because like if you look like a movie like In the Mouth of Madness, I don't know if you've ever seen In the Mouth of Madness. I went to see that twice in the movie theater. Once with my dad, and my dad said never again. That was the last time we went to the movie theaters. My dad left our family afterward. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah, I know. Because it messes with your mind. And the thing is, Sam Neill, first of all, he was like a horror icon. During that time, he had that stint right before Jurassic Park. But the fact that you can sit down and watch a movie and walk away from it feeling slightly disturbed, I think that's a win, So,
yeah.
But I don't think like Hollywood and like, big Hollywood, when it comes to awards and stuff like that, I think they tend to overlook that. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, it's a conversation that I've definitely had, and I think there's validity to it. I do think horror in particular isn't one that we can, as horror fans, it's fair to single it out, but I think the same could be said about broad comedies. Like, when's the last time like a straightforward comedy won an Academy Award? When's the last time a science fiction movie or a fantasy? It's genre filmmaking is something that the Academy tends to turn their noses up to. Mm-hmm. And it's not so much, I don't think it's an intended prejudice, but it's such an insulary community. These are the people that are making movies in Hollywood, and there's certain kind of things that are always going to resonate with them. Therefore, you get terms like Oscar bait. You see a movie and it's about a person with blank as an affliction, or maybe they're a minority struggling in the antebellum South. The Oscars like struggle movies a lot of times. And for better or worse, I think there's definitely a place for all sorts of storytelling. But when a movie like Green Book wins over something like Hereditary, I think that was the 92nd Academy Awards, who's talking about Green Book anymore other than as a laughingstock of a Best Picture movie, right? And when you look at Toni Collette's performance in Hereditary.
Hereditary.
Hold on a second. Hereditary.
When you look at Toni Collette's performance in Hereditary, it's like the audience saw something that the Academy, I don't even think, bothered to take the time to look at. And I don't know why that is.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. What about you, Juju? Like, what do you?
It's like there's a lot of movies that end up getting like snuffed, and a lot of one that was really bad, and I'm pretty sure still remembered, is La La Land with
La La Land.
La La Land with what was the other movie that won it?
When he read the
Moonlight.
Moonlight, yeah.
And it can kind of go both ways. You could say it was a good movie, but one is still remembered today. Sometimes the Oscars pick out whatever.
And the thing is, a lot of people tend to forget, like, the Oscars is made up from a lot of, actors and stuff like that. They're the ones who get the movies. They're the ones who kind of make the decision. And I think that it's more... And that's why we see this big surgence of all sorts of film festivals, because of the fact that we're like, hey, we want everybody to have a voice, but here are like the 1%ers that kind of make a decision over here and are the ones who can afford to get dressed up and, have a I'm going to pat my back party. And we obviously we are whoremongers for seeing that kind of stuff. Plus, I mean, one of the biggest concerns that a lot of people were having was because of the fires that were going on. A lot of these vendors, hairdressers, this is their time to shine. This is when they actually make a ridiculous amount of money, and their businesses were all going to be super affected. So they were like, we're going to go ahead and go through with this. We're going to go through with the awards, even though there's like massive tragedies everywhere. I mean, Steve Guttenberg made the news, and people were like, "Who the hell is Steve Guttenberg?" And that was offensive.
But we knew.
We knew.
Yes.
That was awful. I couldn't believe that. But it just kind of goes to show that Hollywood must, it's like the show must go on, but for good cause, and I get that. But at the same time, I think it's really cool if we take the time to be like, okay, well, there's a movie like Longlegs, right? And I'm not here to spoil anything. I'm just here to talk on a general view. But whenever you see like like I said, a good horror movie that really kind of touches you in one way or another, appropriately and consensually, then it's always a really good time. And it's rare that
I, for one, was shocked by the end of Longlegs to find out how long the killer's legs were. That was like a big spoiler to me. I hope I didn't ruin the experience for anyone.
Just don't tell them about the spiders, bro. Don't tell them about the spider and all the other leg references that are throughout the movie.
You're right, though, and I appreciate you humanizing Hollywood in a way also, because the snarky side of us always points to the most successful people, right? And you're like them in their ivory towers, but it's so much more of a diverse ecosystem than that. And even the majority of actors and directors and screenwriters are just waiting for their moment over their regular working class jobs, struggling to pursue this thing that they're passionate about. So absolutely important to say, like, there is a lot more to it than the people that are strictly winning the Oscars. But I think we need to kind of redefine the way that we look at movies as whether they're successful or not. Like, I personally don't give a damn if a movie wins an Oscar or not. I don't think that gives it the kind of validation, like Damien Leone that directed Terrifier 3, biggest independent movie that was released in 2024. That was a pretty big win, A
huge win, because you rarely see what they call like a gore fest movie. You rarely see something like that even raise an eyebrow, right? Where everyone was talking about it. And I'm talking about like major news channels and stuff like that. That's unheard of, So it's understandable.
Let me ask you this. Do you think there's always going to be this ideological debate about whether or not people are influenced by media? Do you think that there's anything that you can point to as an indicator of a person and say they like horror movies because blank?
I think it generally comes down to how much of a horror fan they are. Because sometimes you can tell if they're like right here. I'm wearing a horror Hawaiian shirt, so it really comes down to how much of a horror fan they are. If they just make it obvious, or you can just kind of tell by, let's say they
if you walk into a Hot Topic, I'm pretty sure you're kind of somewhere close. No, but I think the really cool part about that is just like the same question you could ask about any kind of geek culture, right? There are people walking around you that maybe they full on LARP during the weekend, right? And you're like, oh, okay, well, Tim from accounting is a 12th Night Paladin who could go ahead and kind of like shoot this magic. Bro, it's like sometimes most people don't feel comfortable, and like you kind of touched upon this in the very beginning. I think some people just don't feel comfortable kind of really showing who they really are unless they're within their community. And then it's when you walk in like a place like Pensacon, right, where everyone is just kind of like letting it hang out naturally, right? It's the hull over beach. If you were talking about Miami, like where people go to sunbathe naked, it's the hull over beach of fat Italian old men with just their swang in the air. They don't
Great
care.
analogy.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
But it's true. I think that unless you're actually put in a circumstance where you can kind of talk about it and find your niche, and I think more and more social media has done that. Because that was a big thing with a lot of indie horror films back in the day, or even indie films in general. It was guerrilla marketing. It's like, get your friends, here's the VHS tape. They, at one point, they didn't really care too much about making the money as much as they did about getting their vision out there.
Yeah. I think, Juju, you make a good point about like aesthetic signifiers. I think what I was kind of fishing for, and I don't think there's much of a case to be made, but some people are like, you got to be really sick to watch horror movies. And in my experience, that's never been the case. I've found horror fans to be nice and empathetic and all of those things that you wouldn't think a psychopath or a sociopath is. Now, I think historically there's a couple of different like kinds of horror movies. Like when Universal was making their monster movies, the villains were almost always sympathetic. So it's this kind of exploration of like what motivates the monster. They were actually just misunderstood. You think about the creature from the Black Lagoon, you think about Frankenstein, Dracula to some extent,
King Kong. I mean, they say
yes,
it was beauty that killed the beast. Well, it's
that's exactly
misconceptions.
Right.
So absolutely.
But then when we're here in a current era, like the slasher movies, I think there's the final girl phenomenon, but the killer is typically the one thread that carries through. Like from one Halloween to the next, to the next, to the next. It wasn't until later that Laurie was kind of, defined as the final girl, where, we look back and we see Heather Langenkamp as Nancy in Friday Nightmare on Elm Street, excuse me.
Yeah.
But at the time,
you got me screwed up.
There's a lot of different characters that carry through. Eventually, you do go to the movies to watch the kills. I say all that to say, like, the Terrifier movies, there is kind of a celebration of the sadism, right? Like, Art was the star, and we've got Sienna now, but Art was the star. You go to watch him dispatch people in really, really gnarly and violent and disgusting ways. But then on the other end of it, you've got somebody like Ari Aster, who's making movies that really are exploring the fallout of trauma and exploring empathy in interesting ways. Like you look at something like Midsummer and the main character, Danny, there, and her kind of journey of being completely sidelined and treated like a burden by her boyfriend to becoming empowered by this cult. And I say that to say, like, you can explore all sorts of different emotional cruxes within this one genre. It's not defined by one thing or the other. And even that, though, like, I don't think you're a sicko because you like sick movies. So, like, what is that? What is it that draws us to horror movies?
Well, and I think a lot of the time also it's like the misconception. I think the misconception of people, the way they kind of perceive things, and it kind of goes back to society as a whole. You know, it's like, well, you know, we see this guy acting shady in the back of a store with a hoodie on. And you're like, well, that guy's stealing. And actually just could be really cold because, you know, he has poor circulation system. You never know.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
you know, we have this misconception of, okay, well, if you like this, then that means that you're this type of person. When in reality, it's a lot more complex than that. And I think it's that kind of sometimes fear of getting that out there that keeps a lot of people, like filmmakers and writers, to kind of write the pieces that they want to write. Because they're like, no one's going to see this. No one's going to... But I think that social media has created this empowered community of followers where everyone's like, hey, yeah, you can, buddy. Yes, you can be...
That's a good point.
You know, that person. Let's go ahead and see it. Plus, you know, you need that. You need that rally cry. And I think the more and more people start to rally behind movies, you know, like Nosferatu, which is fantastic. It's like a really good retelling of, well, a mixture of like the actual book of Bram Stoker's Dracula to kind of like the old Max Schreck movie, right? It's not the same thing, but it is like a really cool view on it. And the other one, which, you know, it's Substance. And you have like Demi Moore like being applauded for, hey, you know, kind of like doing this movie. But I mean, let's remember that George Clooney got a big start with Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.
Yeah, good point.
You know, so it's one of those things where we have to kind of explore how people give these gentle nods to just like amazing stories and are not afraid to tell them, which I think is fantastic. So I think that's really pushed that movement.
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly because, like, as someone who wants to write, who wants to do all that, it's frightening when you see all these movies, all these things that get kind of left in the dust, and you're like, will this even make it to like someone else's like screen? So that's definitely a good point that there are a lot of, again, I'm going to bring him back up. Kevin Smith with Clerks, he kept trying to push Clerks and no one took it until, I forgot his name, but...
Is it He Who Shall Not Be Named?
Yeah. He took the movie and he helped produce it and it got out.
Voldemort. All right, well, no, but, you know, and that's the thing. I think now we don't need big production companies behind things just to get it noticed. I mean, when you look at things like the Blair Witch Project, right, which, I mean, that's something that everybody goes back to. It's like a real simple thing to talk about because it used social media and, well, what social media there was at the time.
Yep.
You know, it used the internet for its advantage, kind of telling this story where... there were news articles, there was like, you know, fake interviews done. So you're like found footage film. You're like, what? And I remember two things when I went to go see that, because I did go see it like opening night. I'm like, I gotta see this thing. The theater was packed. Like there was like people standing, and they played Muppets in Space first by mistake, and like that there was almost a riot. It was funny. And I was like,
that's amazing.
Yeah, I was like, boy, they got a really good production value. I don't know how they got Jim Henson on board to fucking do this, but you know, if you look at it, there wasn't a lot to that film. It was the suspension of disbelief that we had to give ourselves that these kids were going to be attacked, that this what we were looking at was real. We were fully immersed in this film. And then when the credits ran and people were like, wait a minute, that's fake. You know, I mean, we'll deal with a snowball effect later. But I think they took something and they ran with it, which is what a lot of people are doing nowadays. They're going with this story. They're like, I'm going to get this out there. There's tons of avenues for people to see this. And I'm just going to go ahead and create my happy. and sometimes that happy is, filled with blood and gore and whatnot, but and it's sometimes it's really good, and like you said, sometimes it's crap. So
yeah.
It's finding a good balance, but you don't have to worry about VHS distribution or any of that stuff anymore.
It's so interesting when you think about so many of those movies that I was drawn to as a kid, back to the full moon features, and how like you got this simple high concept premise. What if killer dolls? What if, real simple thing that is going to be marketable. And then on the flip side of that, you look at Blair Witch Project, we're like, we still don't know what the witch is. Is there a witch? Is it a cult out in the woods? Is it extraterrestrials? Is it some sort of time vortex? We don't know exactly what it is. But that kind of like opened up doors for movies like the Paranormal Activity franchise.
Yep.
It Comes at Night is a more recent movie where it's like, it's all atmosphere, and it's not really as interested in revealing its hand as it is just kind of like creating this sense of dread. And for a long time, that wasn't marketable. And we've finally gotten to a place where like really ambitious stuff like Robert Eggers, less Nosferatu and more something like The Witch, where it's like, how did this become the cult hit that it was? And it just turns out that people's tastes evolve and we get interested in different things. And I think The Witch is incredible. But who would have ever thought that like Robert Eggers' total commitment to period accuracy and having dialogue that on first watch is almost like boxing you out. Like it doesn't matter if you get this or not. And then it grew to have a huge following.
Oh yeah, and there's like tons of movies that are out there like that. I mean, if you think about it, like the original Evil Dead, right? When you go back to the original student film, which, I mean, Evil Dead, and I know I'm probably going to get hell for this, but whatever. Like Evil Dead 2 is Evil Dead, just, with production.
Yeah.
And, it's one of those circumstances where, I mean, okay, well, Sam Raimi has produced some absolutely amazing other horror films, not just that. And he gave us, Spider-Man the way we wanted to see him. He gave us a lot of really good stuff, but his humble beginnings started from, a 16 millimeter film in school, getting some friends together, kind of saying, hey, listen, we're going to go ahead and do this. And I think that spirit of just, hey, we're going to go out there and kind of make this movie. Hey, we're going to go out there and do this thing. I think that's really flourished and has found not only an audience, but because let's face it, like I said, horror is subjective, right? There's tons of people that absolutely love different types of horror. There's a person who's going to love Event Horizon, and there's a good person who's going to love Terrifier. And then sometimes the two don't intermix, but because the genre is so big and wide, I think there's a large net to cast out there. And I think that it's more and more we're kind of seeing ourselves see a lot of these independent feature films, plus things like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, just a lot of places that are able to get funding behind, just as long as you have like some sort of social media presence.
Yeah, that has kind of become a big a lot of the gatekeeping now can happen at that level, and that's unfortunate for people who are like really serious about the craft, but gaining a digital footprint it's not easy, despite what people will have you believe. It is a very challenging thing that I haven't cracked the code. If I do, I will definitely let you know how to do that, but it does seem like nowadays, if you have an audience, if you're an influencer and you have an audience, you have more access to money, to opportunities. Sometimes that turns out really well, like in the case of that movie Talk to Me, Australian horror flick with the hand that came out 2 years ago. That movie is freaking awesome. And it was a couple of YouTubers that made that movie, which is very, very cool to see. I don't want to hijack, but I'm curious. As we're sitting here talking about horror movies, are there some recent ones that like we've touched basically on Nosferatu? Juju, did you see Nosferatu?
I only got to see some of it, and I had to stop because, not that it was a bad movie. That sounds like it was, but no, I loved it.
It kind of sounds like it.
It sounds like it. maybe I need to rewatch. But there's a few movies that like I've watched a bit of Substance, and I thought that was a nasty and wonderful movie at the same time. And also, if you're one of those people who overlook things too, you could be like, oh well, this is having a hidden message of how bad Hollywood is. You can take it any way, and I think that's also another cool thing about movies in general. Or you just could go to horror movies that people can interpret it in different ways, and the writer could be like, no, that's not how it was. But
yeah, it's either a political statement.
Yeah,
if you're looking at either like Night of the Living Dead Part 2 or Part 3, where it was like, okay, well, here we're going to go ahead and make fun of capitalism as a whole, which is Part 2, and then Part 3 is like, hey, let's poke fun of the military. There was always like the hidden agenda stuff, but I mean, a lot of people really don't see that. A lot of people kind of like are there just for the good time and the gore. And then there's
that's a really good point.
That kind of like.
In fact, I want to say that the director, who are we talking about? Romero, right?
Yeah, George A. Romero.
He wasn't even aware of the political leanings of Night of the Living Dead until he was told about it in retrospect by people that analyze film, and then he leaned into it. And I like that, and I think that's a good point, Juju. I like that you can kind of watch movies on multiple different levels, and you can also kind of, with a little bit of creativity, skew them to meet your needs, kind of like despite what they are. And that's a great thing about art. And to your point, KS, it's like it's in the eye of the beholder. Like there's no wrong read on art. Nowadays, a lot of times filmmakers will come out and make their intent completely crystal clear.
Yeah.
And I don't love that. I would almost rather it be kind of left to interpretation. These days, everybody wants a soundbite. I get it. But I like when I look at a movie like The Substance compared to Nosferatu, I think the only reason why The Substance is getting as much critical attention as it is because it showed a 50-year-old woman naked in it. And that's like a really big thing in Hollywood right now. It's a great movie. I absolutely love it.
I'm like shocked that nude older women is a big thing in Hollywood.
Right
it
now.
really it is.
Yeah, sadly.
I'm so out of touch.
I wouldn't even say that it's, from my perspective, it's not that it's a big thing. I think that it is getting a lot of weight imbued upon it because of the fact that it's dealing with women in Hollywood aging. Yeah. And that ties back to my thesis about struggle movies in Hollywood and how certain things resonate with people. It's like the Academy understands that the pain that women that are aging out of certain roles and having to embrace the other roles, that's something very relatable to them. What's awesome is that it found as wide of an audience as it did, because it is a completely absurdist black comedy that I absolutely love it. But it's, I would put it in there with like Brian Usna or David Cronenberg, these like body horror movies. Mm-hmm. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I was like saying that, I mean, that's a really good point. It's just the thing is that I guess also going back to that whole thing of being relevant, right? And kind of like staying with your audience, if you're going to pander to your audience, which, I'm not saying that's what it's doing, right? But when you think about it, the more you kind of give the people what they want, the more traction a film is going to get, especially when it becomes absolutely relevant, because I think a lot of our generation is just getting older and older. And what before we were looking at, these teenage slasher horror films, now we're kind of aging into a more sophisticated kind of like level, So I take into that retrospect too. It's like, okay, well, movies like, for example, like The Wrestler, right? The Wrestler was a really good piece on how you could have so much and lose everything and just kind of want to live back into that history. And then you look back at another movie called Best of Times with that was Robin Williams, and it was Kurt Kurt Russell.
I haven't seen that.
Yeah, it's a great movie about this guy who fumbled like a pass or missed a kick. I can't remember right now. I know, but this has lived with him his whole life, that he wants to recreate this thing at his middle age. Robin Williams does, because he feels like the one thing that his star moment was he peaked in high school, type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I can relate with that on a deep level.
But I think the same story gets told over and over again, but the ones that we really resonate with us are the ones that we could find most relatable. So, it kind of boils down to that, because I think that's where a lot of indie films are really touching upon. Like, there was a really good one that came out recently. It was like My Old Ass. Which is a great film, which takes a very strange premise and turns it into kind of like a retrospect of looking into oneself. And maybe we were kind of a little bit smarter at a younger age for being brave than we are, as we get older and more cautious about the world. And I think with a lot of these new storytellers, right, they find that. They find that voice. And a lot of these horror movies kind of help tell a lot of these weird circumstances. I mean, not as much as a creepy hand that grants wishes or anything like that, kind of monkey's paw type of situation. But I think some of us kind of like resonate with that, because we do want, this wish, these realities, this money to come and show up on our door. We worry whenever we pull into a crazy back road or get lost in the backwoods here. Is something going to happen to us? Is there going to be a slasher? When we see a cemetery late at night, is something going to come out of the ground? It's like we have these deep-rooted fears, and the more people play on it, and the more capability that we have to express these things, I think the more and more we see that they're going to be out there for us to enjoy. So
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you tying a little red yarn between My Old Ass and The Substance is like a revelation to me, because those are like two sides of the same coin. I didn't even think about it like that. There's been a couple of good movies that came out this year. I'm not gonna say snubs. Like I don't think snubs, because I know what the Oscars usually are looking for.
Yeah.
It doesn't surprise me, and I'm not willing to take one movie out of the runnings to put another one in. I'm not going to say this movie should have beat this movie, because I don't even know how to, like, when it comes to ranking movies
that?
and stuff. Yeah, I have no idea. But Hugh Grant was really good in Heretic. Naomi Scott was really good in Smile 2. Willa Fitzgerald was really good in Strange Darling, and I think a director's screenplay for J.T. Molnar for Strange Darling could have probably been in the conversation, but it is just a matter of, just the fact that horror movies oftentimes get overlooked.
Yeah, and Strange Darlings was like on a lot of movie critics like top 10 of the year kind of list.
It's cool. Yeah.
It's just like when I look at Edgar Wright, like back in the day, and you had Edgar Wright, who went ahead and did Last Night in Soho,
Yeah.
And that was such a great, because the thing is you had a twist within a twist, and you swear you saw it coming, and you M. Night Shyamalan, the little piece there at the end, which I'm pretty sure M. Night was like looking at this and going, well, that's not fair.
I wish I would have done that.
Yeah. But no, absolutely. Like, and that's kind of like the whole basis of the conversation that we were having, is just that it's strange to kind of look at Hollywood, say, okay, well, this is okay by our standards, and even though in our hearts we're like, okay, well, we know that these other movies are absolutely fantastic, but it's like you got to give Hollywood its night. And I mean, we're there. They exist because we watch them, right? The whole tree falling in the woods type of thing. Just like these reality stars, you might hate them and stuff like that, or influencers. The only reason they exist is because we give them the power to.
It's 100% true.
You know, so the thing is it all comes back to us. So it's like, if you love indie film, if you love indie horror, go and support it in the theater. Yes, the prices are ridiculous, but you know, that kind of tells everybody, because I think we live in a world where, like, theaters is an amazing experience, but a lot of people like to stay at home in pajamas. But
Yeah.
I think right now it's more socially acceptable to go out in pajamas more often. So
You been to the airport lately?
I know, right? Yeah. I mean, what happened there? When did we say it was okay to, like, you know, wear like flip-flops and all this other stuff on? I mean, come on, people. This is an amazing feat of technology. We were being suspended in a tin tube up in the air. You know, dress up a little bit. Says the guy who always wears sleeveless shirts and shorts. But still, it's one of those things that I think more and more we're going to start seeing a change in Hollywood. We're going to see a changing of the guard, because a lot of the older old school actors are starting to kind of like phase themselves out, and all the young bloods coming in. You know, and it's not about politics or anything else, because everything is technically about some kind of political thing, whether it's Hollywood or actual government stuff. But I think it's time for, like, a lot of, you know, young, fresh minds to kind of take the reins and just run with it, because all they have to lose is time, and time is a precious commodity, you know.
The most,
because there's no amount of money that'll get you some time back.
That is so true, and it kind of ties into the theme of the substance. As we're talking about this new guard, what's the shot that the substance wins? Best picture, best director, best actress, best original screenplay, or best makeup hairstylist? You guys want to weigh in and say which one you think? Is it gonna win any of them?
I think it's gonna win maybe.
I think probably best makeup.
Makeup is definitely gonna be on there.
I'm just saying. Horror. Think about it. If anything, I think that's where it's gonna lean into.
Yeah.
But I think everything else is kind of reserved for others. If you get my drift.
100%. I think it's cool that it's there. It's cool that it's getting any sort of attention in the first place, and it does. Hopefully, moving forward, this opens up the door and allows others to have the same kind of opportunities and the same kind of mainstream attention. I agree with y'all. I think best makeup is probably the. It sounds so reductive, but we're talking about the actual, like, makeup effects in the movies. So, like, I don't know who else it would go to if not Nosferatu, who is also being nominated in the same category.
Same category.
So.
But the thing is, I think Nosferatu's too on the nose, though. You know how sometimes they'll be like, it's like, okay, well, yeah, I know we're kind of doing this, but the reason why I think it has the best shot to win that is because of the subject matter and the way it's being used and the way that they're using makeup to tell that story.
It's a really good point.
So, and like I said, I don't want to be that pretentious, pompous person who's like, well, you know, but at the same time, I think looking at what Hollywood has deemed, okay, well, this is award worthy. If they had to pick one, I think it would be the more obvious choice for kind of being on the extreme end of, we're going to give the audience what they want. And I think that just goes back to the whole thing about feeding into your audience and really kind of delivering that home, which a lot of these Hollywood winners don't really do. They move you in a particular way, but it's hard to sometimes relate to a lot of the characters that we see on the screen. Where I think, like a lot of the indie horror, we relate to a lot of these characters. They're they're one bad nightmare or one bad taco away from like, you know, somebody's reality. But I think the world's become a dangerous place where we tend to kind of hang back in our fantasies and our fears more than we do in the whimsical reality of I'm going to bump into some Hallmark guy or meet somebody who owns an egg farm and we're going to be off and be rich somewhere. So it's one of those. But let's do this. I absolutely love to take a moment and just kind of like kind of review things in your wheelhouse, right? I think it is absolutely essential to kind of give some really good final thoughts as far as you being in the position that you are, right? You are a moderator, right? So like when you do these things at Pensacon, you've been able to talk up there and kind of relate to the subject matter that's there. Now you're on another side of things where you're going in there as a filmmaker. You're going in there with bright-eyed, bushy-tailed with my project here in hand. What advice can you give to people watching this going, I want to go ahead and get my indie horror off the ground? I've been watching the Shia LaBeouf video about Just Do It constantly over and over. It's my affirmation. But coming from someone who has actually done it and who doesn't understand how important it is to comb their hair when they go on social media. I want to hear your point of view. What would you tell aspiring directors out there that I want to go ahead and do that? Yeah, exactly.
Close enough.
Inspiring, perspiring, and go for it.
Yeah, the most cliche thing that I can possibly say is also the most true thing, and that is follow Shia LaBeouf's advice. Just do it. But past that, it's very, very worth being aware that this is going to sound negative, and I'm going to try to frame it in a way that it doesn't sound negative because it's just being.
I want you to phrase it exactly how you see it produced in your mind, because the thing is that if you try to change it, it might change its meaning. If it sounds negative, it's fine. Because the thing is, sometimes a little negativity goes a long way. So go ahead and just, I want you to say it exactly how you would.
The limitations that you are going to experience as a filmmaker are going to be exponentially increased by the amount of people involved in any given production. When I did this documentary, I had my subject, which was the City of Five Flags Pinball League. They were all going to be meeting every month, whether I was there or not. So all I had to do was show up and document that. When it came to the post-production stuff, I did all the footage. People had to hold the camera for me when they were shooting footage of me, but I'm sitting in my little office that I'm in right now, and I'm like, all right, I've got 12 hours of footage. I need to get this down to 12 minutes of film. I need a soundtrack. I need it edited. I need a title card. I need the little vanity card at the beginning. The most basic rudimentary things you could think of. And I have a friend, Dan Weaver, who did the title card for me. It's fantastic. It's like a 3D pinball table. And so I say that to say my subject was going to be there. Schedule is already locked down. I just had to show up with a camera. My friend Dan has been working on computer graphics for the last several months. He worked for Amazon for many, many years. He's kind of trying to refine his purpose, his happy, and that kind of led him down this path of doing some just really brilliant work. So he was enthusiastic about doing the project. I make music in FL Studio, particularly Lucid Memories, that you graciously mentioned at the beginning of the stream or the podcast. It's a synthwave YouTube channel dedicated to like kind of that nostalgic sound that you might hear in Grand Theft Auto Vice City, or more recently like Stranger Things, very 80s throwback kind of sound. So I did the score for it. I did the editing. I went Robert Rodriguez this time around. And the reason why I did that is because there was nobody holding me by the purse strings. There was nobody holding up my schedule. There was no other egos that I had to deal with throughout that process. And I was fortunate that I'm able to do all of those things. But if you are a first-time filmmaker, the beautiful thing about horror is that you can do it with minimal resources. You get a good actor, actress. You get somebody who's able to wear a killer clown mask. You got your one primary location. You find a buddy who can do music, and you make it happen, because the more people that you bring into it, the more it's going to throw your schedule into chaos. You're going to you have your vision, but now all of a sudden you're having to deal with the visions of other people and kind of reconcile that without sacrificing what it is you're trying to do going into it. So when you're starting out, don't put a whole bunch of obstacles in your way. Do it with as few people that all share in the same vision as possible, and just get through that. And if you're a great collaborator and you feel like expanding that roster of cast and crew members as you go along, but the first time you do it, try to keep it tight. That's my advice.
That's great advice, actually, going through, because I think that's where a lot of people kind of tend to struggle, is they, and this is with everything, they tend to get stuck in their own thoughts, and instead of actually doing something, they spend their whole time researching, preparing. You're always preparing. Just go. You know, because the thing is, I think more than anything, it's your baby in the long run, which, you know, the Plunge premieres at Pensacon February 15th, which we're absolutely excited to go ahead and get you out there in the world. Let's go. And, you know, hopefully it won't be a tilt. Oh, you see that? I know my stuff.
Well done.
Oh, I did my research. Oh, look at me.
Well done.
Oh, insert glorious clapping right here. But, you know, there you go. It's one of those things that I think the joy of seeing other people enjoy what you have and what you've produced, I think that's the payment in itself. So,
yep,
fantastic. Well, Jeremy, I've had an amazing time sitting here talking to you about everything that you enjoy, because you're a narcissist. But no,
it's very true. Ask my wife; she knows.
She paid me to say that, by the way. We're not sponsored by a lot of people,
Not surprised,
except for your wife. But no, absolutely. We wish you the absolute best. We're going to be in touch.
Thanks,
Remember,
man.
The YouTube channel, so Lucid Memories on YouTube. We're going to go ahead and link all the social media, so that way you could follow him. He has amazing insight on wrestling, being a new person into the world of wrestling. Thank you so much.
We got to talk about that sometime.
We will.
Yes.
Yeah.
We will.
Fun one. Yeah.
You know, and plus, always with the amazing insights, like you said, always like a geek fan. So there's always a thought to be shared by Jeremy here. Any other last words?
No, thanks for having me. I think this was super cool.
Fantastic. Well, we appreciate you having on the inaugural first return back of Chimichanga Talk. This is Chimichanga Talk 2.0, faster and better and with less tariffs than Canada. So I hope everyone out there still continues to stay tuned. Remember to like and subscribe and do all those other stuff that people tell you to do, because I'm old and I don't really understand. I think I have a Snapchat, but I'm not 100% sure. You know, but you can find us wherever you normally find your podcasts, from Spotify to iTunes and the other letter tunes as well. But it was an absolute pleasure. Remember, check out Jeremy Branch at Pensacon coming up here in just a short weekend away with the premiere of The Plunge, and check them out on YouTube. Guys, thank you so much for joining us on Chimichanga Talk. It's been me, Deadpool Speaks. That's been Jeremy Branch, and this is Bad Juju. Say hi, Juju.
Hi.
You talk too much. So, guys, stay tuned. Next week, we're going to probably have another podcast. I don't know. It might be another 3 years before we have another one. Jeremy, I think you broke the algorithm, but still. Guys, thank you so much. Take care. Deadpool, out.
Thank you for listening this week, and remember, just like always, we will be back next week with another great guest and more adventures from the land of Chimichanga Talk. So tune in next time, same Deadpool time, same Deadpool channel.